Hey everybody, I'm nutritionist Dr. Mike Roussel, and welcome to this edition of the Dr. Mike Show. Today we're going to be talking about new metrics for health in the new year and some things that I'd like you to start tracking in your body to make sure that you're going to be optimal health and be able to perform optimally in your day-to-day life. Come the end of December, early January, I like to do an episode where we kind of hone in on new goal setting, things to look at in the upcoming year, some things about New Year's resolutions. So you can go to mikeroussel.com. We'll link some of them up in the show notes, or you can go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the podcast from and scroll back to some of the older episodes that we do end of December, early January, talking about New Year's resolutions. Now, I'm a huge fan of New Year's resolutions. I know that it's almost popular now for different health and fitness experts to kind of rail against New Year's resolutions because, New Year's resolutions always fail and you should be doing this anyway. And kind of that, that whole line of thinking, something I'm sure you're very familiar with and you've heard. So yes, do most people give up on their New Year's resolutions? Totally. Does that mean that you shouldn't set them? Definitely not. I have here in my office, I have a stack. I kind of do an end of the year review every year. And so I have this stack of papers. It's kind of written out longhand about goals, things I want to do, how I want to go about accomplishing them. And guess what? They didn't all get done. I can look back 2 years and there's still some things on that list that I didn't get done, which is totally fine. Sometimes when you set goals at the beginning of the year or whenever you decide to make a change, you get a little aggressive with your goals and maybe you're just not something that you can achieve or not something that you are committed to achieving. It's totally fine halfway into a goal to say, well, this isn't important to me anymore. It's just like if you start reading a book and you get halfway through it and you're like, this book stinks. You shouldn't have to finish the book. So it's totally fine to not complete goals if you've just lost that drive or that passion or that desire to achieve it. Let's say you set a handful of health and fitness goals, and maybe after you achieve the first two, the second two, they don't even look that appealing, which is totally fine because the person that you are after you've achieved your first two goals is different than the person you were, when you set your first two goals. So it totally makes sense that you would maybe not have interest in goals that you set 6-8 months ago. So I definitely want you to give yourself permission from a goal setting perspective to toss out goals, reset new ones, or constantly tweak and adjust them. This idea that we set a goal and it's, the goal is in stone for as long as it is till you achieve it, it's just false. You don't have to do that. But when it comes to New Year's resolutions, why I like them so much is because I think so much of behavior change has to do with momentum. We talk about this all the time on the show. The world is out to get you. The world is out to make you eat more, move less, right? That our current society as a whole is not set up for optimal health. And that's fine, but I think we just need to be aware of that and need to know that there's going to be a lot of friction and a lot of resistance if you're trying to make these positive changes. That's why community is so important. That's why finding somebody who can be your goal person that you can confide in and talk to with through different struggles is so important. That's why momentum is so important when it comes to goal setting, that you need to get things moving. And for so many people, myself included, the new year is a great time to harness the collective momentum of everyone that says, this is a new year, I'm going to start something new and move forward with it, right? There's a great energy about it. And I don't think that you should be the person who's like, oh, why start now? You're going to fail. You should be doing it anyway. It's just terrible. Let's be the optimist. Let's be the good force. Let's contribute to this greater momentum of behavior change. I was really happy to see a variety of posts this week on social talking about, come the first of the year, the gyms are going to be crowded and don't be a jerk about it. Right? I think that's so important. Just because you've always lifted weights or you've always worked out, if someone new comes in, you don't have to be salty about them being there. You should be excited about it and excited about that camaraderie, them making the change, them taking those steps forward. So as we move into the new year, I fully encourage you to embrace New Year's resolutions embrace people that are trying to make change in their lives. And if you know how to do something, if you've been successful at making a particular change and you see someone trying to do it, be that resource, be that help. Let them understand, like, oh yeah, no, do it this way, or I did it this way and it worked, and I tried to, prep my meals this way, it definitely didn't work, so I did this instead. Nothing actually keeps you on track with what you want to do like helping someone else stay on track with what they want to do. There's just something about that positive energy of helping someone else move forward towards their goal that helps keep you committed so you can continue to move forward. Super, super important. Now, that's not what I wanted to talk about today. Today, the show is about metrics for health. So what are some new metrics for health that we want to look at in the new year? And I think this is really important. If you know about my goal setting process, it's a 3-step process. We write a visceral goal narrative, which is a longhand story kind of entry that outlines what is your life when you achieve the goal, down to these little details that we can get emotionally tied into so you can fully visualize and picture what it's going to feel and look like and what that experience is going to be when you achieve your goal. That's the first thing. The second thing is your targets. What are your target goals? What are the things that you actually want to accomplish? And then the third piece is, what are your action goals? What do you have to do on a day-to-day basis to achieve your target goals? Right? So there's this step-by-step approach here when it comes to goal setting. We set the visceral goal narrative, which gives us that emotional tie and that vivid view of what it's going to look like. Target goals say, okay, well, if that's what it's going to look like, what do I have to achieve in order to do that? And action goals tell you what you have to do on a daily basis to hit those target goals. So these three pieces are so key to not only setting your goals, but long-term goal achievement. So today I want to talk a bunch about target goals, specifically around markers for health, because I don't think that we actually spend enough time thinking about these markers for health. So first we're going to talk about physical fitness, then we're going to talk about heart, then we'll talk about blood sugar regulation. So we'll have health and then cardiometabolic. And then I want to introduce and talk to you about this idea of being a performance optimizer, and a 6-week and also a year-long thing that I want to challenge you to do this year in 2023, that those are our action goals that are really going to feed forward for you down the line to help you achieve really whatever your target goals are, but especially if you just want to improve performance in any area of your life, your health, your performance at work, your performance in your social life, like setting these key foundational things that I'm going to encourage you to do on a daily basis and then accumulate to an annual basis are just going to set your physiology up so you feel good. Last year around this time, I did an interview with Jason McCarthy. We'll link it up in the show notes for his Glorious Professionals podcast. Jason is the co-founder and CEO of Go Ruck, a company that I love their backpacks. Been using them for about a decade. I write content also for the Go Ruck community about nutrition and physical fitness and rucking. But one of the things that Jason said during our interview, one of his barometers for how he's doing in his life from a performance optimizer perspective is when he wakes up, does he feel good? And I love that idea. It's so simple. It's just, hey, when I wake up, am I feeling good? And if you wake up feeling good, you know you're on the right track. And so these 5 key areas of being a performance optimizer, as I call it, is going to set you up so you have that same metric or that same, litmus test as Jason, that you can wake up and you say, man, I feel really good. That's what these things are geared towards. So first, though, let's talk about physical fitness. Now, it's the new year. We're talking about metrics for health. People definitely want to talk about weight loss. They're going to talk about body fat percentage. You can talk about BMI, right? There's a variety of different factors that you can talk about. The thing here, though, and this is actually probably going to be like the least scientific metric, is weight or body fat percentage, which is ironic because these are probably the things that people get hung up on the most. I don't really, whatever your body weight or whatever you want your body weight to be, I don't really care. Like if you were like, do you have an opinion about my triglycerides? Totally have an opinion about your triglycerides. Your body weight, I think that's more up to you. I think your body weight is a reflection of the accumulation of your lifestyle and your habits. And so if you focus on those habits and doing those things, how those accumulate on a day-to-day basis, that's really going to drive your body weight. If you want to be 6% body fat, 10% body fat, 15% body fat, you can be healthy at a variety of those levels. I think the one thing you do, and this is sort of the Jason McCarthy way of looking at it, is when you look at yourself, do you say, I'm healthy? Or do you look at yourself and say, I should lose some weight because I'm not feeling very healthy? And then set and decide what you want to lose if you feel like you should. Someone else might look at you and say, oh man, Dr. Mike, you need to lose 10 pounds. But I look at myself and say, I'm totally fine. I'm good where I am. I think we've let with body weight so many people's outside opinions come in that it's skewed how we should really live our lives or what that is. Yes, I think obesity is a metabolic problem, right? And it is a disease state that we need to move forward and work against. But if you are in a state where you find that you're very overweight and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're being very honest, you'll probably say, yeah, I should lose some weight, right? That's would be good for my health. And so from a weight loss or from a body weight perspective or from a body fat perspective, I just think it's important you have that honest conversation with yourself. And then you decide how much weight you want to lose. And one of the things that I've seen time and time and time again with clients when it comes to weight loss is they'll set a goal, which is generally arbitrary. It's usually somewhere between, it's usually a 5 or a factor of 5 or 10, right? 10 pounds, 15 pounds, 25 pounds, or it's a weight that they used to weigh at some other point in their life. And they say, I want to weigh that. And then what happens is people sometimes get to that goal and say, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. And they lose that 10 pounds. But the idea of how they were going to look and feel, right? Maybe it was something they wrote in their visceral goal narrative. After they lose that 10 pounds, they're not there yet. And so they actually need to lose another 10 pounds. So chances are, whatever you set as your primary weight loss goal, in my experience, what you're going to find is that you're going to end up extending that a little bit further to really get to the point that you've identified in that visceral goal narrative or that vision of yourself that you had in your head, which is totally fine. So that's why we're talking about re-upping and changing and updating goals. You got to give yourself that grace to do it. And it happens all the time with weight loss. But again, if you're doing the habits on the action side, I really believe that body weight takes care of itself. And so you just need to look at yourself, be honest, and say, do I feel like I need to lose weight to be healthy? Yes or no? And then make that happen. The other thing from a physical fitness perspective that it's important that we look at is our cardiorespiratory fitness, right? So our VO2 max, and then also our resting heart rate. So these are two factors that we don't actually get a lot of good guidance from a medical perspective. I would say it's important to note as we move, especially as we go down and look at some of the heart health metrics and some of the blood sugar regulation metrics. These are very clinical in nature, and I'll try to not be so as clinical when we talk about them, but it's important to discuss. But it's also really important to discuss all these clinical medical markers with your physician. And we're going to talk about VO2 max right now, and there's this broad variability in it, right? And so me on this podcast couldn't tell you exactly what you should do in your life because I have no idea about your health and your current medical state, et cetera. So it's important that you take this information, share it with your doctor, talk with your doctor about it so that the two of you can make a decision together. All right. But so when we look at VO2 max, and here the thing with VO2 max, and which is just think of it as a measure of your cardiovascular fitness. It is tightly linked to survival rates and reduction in mortality. And what's so cool about VO2 max is if you go from a very low level of fitness to a moderate level of fitness, there's a huge jump. You get a huge benefit. We talked about this 2 shows ago when we were talking about activity. We talked about that strong, fit, and healthy life philosophy. That initial, if you're not in good shape and you just start going for walks, that intensity is relative. And so what's intense for you when you're not in good shape versus what's going to be intense for you once you get into really good shape, right? They're very relative, but you get benefits both ways at a low fitness level and at a high fitness level because fitness is so relative. So with VO2 max, when you're moving from this low state of cardiovascular fitness to a moderate state of cardiovascular fitness, you get a huge improvement, which would be a reduction in mortality rates. You get a huge reduction in risk of a variety of chronic diseases, as well as certain cancers. And then as you kind of move up, you still continue to get benefits. But if you move from a high level of fitness to an elite level of fitness, that difference is definitely much smaller than the change you get from a low level of fitness to a moderate level of fitness. So wherever you are, as you improve your fitness, you're going to get better. And it's important to, though, recognize that you get the biggest bang for your buck at the bottom. There's actually, I'm going to pull it up because I had saved this when I was going to talk about this research paper, this quote that I wanted to share with you that highlights this specifically. So this is in the conclusion section. This was a paper from JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. We'll link up the article as well. But it says cardiorespiratory fitness, cardiovascular fitness, is inversely associated with long-term mortality with no observed upper limit of benefit. Extremely high aerobic fitness was associated with the greatest survival and was associated with benefits in older patients and those with hypertension. So, okay, no observed upper limit of benefit. So this is amazing. If you think about it, that the more fit you're going to get, the greater the benefits stack and combine and move up. So when you're thinking about engaging in fitness, like, oh, I'm already in good shape, you can actually still get better. So pushing your fitness a little bit further, if that's something you want to do, is only going to reap better rewards. Now, VO2 max, there are certain sets, and I'll link up some references for this. Different age groups, right? There are different targets for VO2 max. And what's really cool, so I remember when I turned 40, so a lot of activity trackers like my Apple Watch, Polar does it. I'm pretty sure Fitbit will do it too. They do estimates of VO2 max, which I think for us, the day-to-day average person, is a totally fine measurement for our VO2 max, because we're just going to kind of monitor it over time. There's no need to go in the lab, get the mask, get on the treadmill, and run till exhaustion, right? We don't need to do that. What we get from our activity tracker is good enough data for what we're trying to accomplish. But what's great, I remember on my 40th birthday that I was looking over my health metrics, and I had moved up a category in VO2 max of my cardiovascular fitness. And I thought, wow, I haven't really been doing that much different. I wonder why. And it's just because I hit a different age chunk. So my VO2 max had actually stayed the same, right? From when I was 39 till the next day when I turned 40. But 40 is a different threshold. They move the markers at a different level. So I was considered a higher level of fitness at that age, one day older. So I'll link up a chart for VO2 max with different age groups so you can look at that. But that's really something important. Look on your phone or whatever fitness app that you use and see where it's estimating your VO2 max and decide, is that something that I really need to spend some more time on this year, enhancing and improving my cardiovascular fitness. The next one I talked about with physical fitness, and this is the last one, would be resting heart rate. Unfortunately, recommendations for resting heart rate are very wide in range. 60 to 100 beats per minute for a resting heart rate is considered a normal. I actually think that if we're thinking about cardiovascular fitness and our overall cardiovascular system and the health of that as a primary driver for our longevity and our performance, that we need to get a little more focused with maintaining a low resting heart rate. And so actually our targets, my personal target, is below 50 beats per minute as a resting heart rate. But I think actually looking below and trying to work so you're that below 60 is a great target. 60 to 100 is considered average or normal, but just below, between 50 and 60 or 40 and 60, as long as you're there due to the fact that you're fitter, not due to the fact that there is a cardiovascular issue, it's only going to benefit you more, your resting heart rate. And you can do that through recovery cardio for cardiac output work. So really working at longer times during that, in that 120 to 130, depending on your age, maybe it's 110 to 120 beats per minute. This is kind of that slow, boring cardio, but it does a really good job at strengthening your heart. It can help lower your blood pressure, but also lower your resting heart rate. So that wraps it up for kind of the fitness aspect of the goals and metrics, new health metrics we want to look at. Now I want to get into cardiovascular. And you know that cardiovascular health is, I know we were talking about fitness as cardiovascular health. This is more like heart health, lipids, and kind of lipidology. You know that that's near and dear to my heart. My PhD work was in cardiovascular nutrition, you know, looking at how do we manipulate macronutrients and foods to reduce risk of cardiovascular disease from our lipid profiles. And one of the things that I'm kind of consistently shocked about when I talk with people about their cholesterol, whether it's a client and doing a medical history or talking with a friend or family member who says, you know, I'm having some trouble, I'd like your advice, is I'll ask them, well, how's your cholesterol? And their response will be, well, my doctor said it's good. And your lipid profile it's not a good or bad thing. Like it could be rather complicated, and you're going to be looking at a number of different variables. They're going to say different things about your heart health, right? So you have your total cholesterol, you have LDL cholesterol, you have HDL cholesterol, and you have your triglycerides, right? Just to get started. So we have these 4 metrics that we're looking at. And so just say, oh, it's good or, oh, it's not good. I encourage you to probe a little deeper. Like, we're going to talk about the numbers. Let's get those numbers. And, you know, with your LDL cholesterol, so first let's start with total cholesterol. Total cholesterol, easy. We want to keep that below 200, right? 200 milligrams per deciliter. So lipids, you know, the cholesterol levels and lipid levels, for some reason they give them they're 2 different standard units of measure, millimoles per liter or milligrams per deciliter. We're just going to talk milligrams per deciliter, mg over dl, right? So when you see that on a test, because that's how it's generally reported, and that's how we'll keep it. But you want this under 200. And what your total cholesterol is, it's really a mixture of a variety of your LDL, your HDL, also your VLDL, some non-HDL cholesterol. So not some of the metrics we're going to talk about, but it's also captures some other things. And, you know, as long as we're controlling all of the different components of our cholesterol, total cholesterol is really going to be a reflection of how we're doing almost overall. But it's kind of like, I consider total cholesterol like the body weight of your lipid panel, right? It might be, your body weight might be 180 pounds, but maybe you're 45% body fat, right? Or you're 180 pounds and you're 6% body fat. You got to dig a little deeper to find out. But as a general rule, we want to keep our total cholesterol under 200. Next, we look at LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol metrics are kind of constantly changing, and there are different levels based on different risk factors in your life. Also, whether you have had a heart attack, whether your age, what some other values on your lipid panel are, if you're taking cholesterol-lowering medications. So it's important to ask and talk to your doctor about what your LDL target is, but know it's generally going to be, historically it's been moving lower and lower and lower, especially if you've had a cardiovascular event. So this is kind of like VO2 max. I'll link up a chart with some recommendations so that you can kind of titrate for yourself and figure out what that risk is. Unfortunately, I don't know if this is actual a technical term, but like in the internet medical space, or the internet fitness space, there has been a lot of pushback against LDL cholesterol, and it kind of comes along with this whole touting the benefits of consuming more saturated fats, which I generally consider misguided. I think controlling saturated fat is important, but saying that you need to eat more saturated fat because of XYZ benefit, I think is very misleading. And, you know, the number one thing we can do in our diets to control LDL cholesterol is to control saturated fat. And so if you're working to lower LDL cholesterol, really lowering and controlling saturated fat is what you want to focus on. So we'll link up the chart so you can look at what your LDL targets would be and really find out what those are. Now, if we were to kind of dig in this rabbit hole of LDL cholesterol a little bit deeper, what you're going to find, and this is like drives people crazy, so LDL cholesterol is historically called your bad cholesterol. And there is actually bad cholesterol that's good and bad cholesterol that's bad. And so as we've gotten smarter and discovered more about how our lipids function, we've discovered that LDL cholesterol particles aren't actually the same. So you can have two types. You can have LDL cholesterol that are big, think of like beach balls, or LDL cholesterol that's small, think of them like bullets. And then your blood vessels are this tube that these cholesterol molecules are going through. And now you would think big LDL cholesterol would be bad, but it's actually the opposite. You want more big LDL cholesterol particles because they bounce then around your blood vessel like a beach ball, right? Just bouncing around, boom, 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 moving down your blood vessels. The small LDL cholesterol, which is often called small dense LDL cholesterol, these are more like bullets. And a bullet isn't going to bounce around your blood vessels. Instead, it's going to get stuck in the wall of your blood vessel, right? And when it gets stuck in the wall of your blood vessel, that is the seed, or that's the starting point of atherosclerosis, or of a plaque being formed, is getting that LDL cholesterol particle stuck in your blood vessel. And then your body comes in, it's like, wait, what is this? And macrophages, and there's all this immunity explosion trying to control it. But then what ends up happening is it ends up becoming this disaster on the side of your blood vessel, and then that plaque gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we actually want big LDL cholesterol particles, not small ones. Now, we still want to control, this is where people kind of get lost. Controlling saturated fat is still important. And then what are the things that we can do to get larger LDL cholesterol particles? We can be more active, right? We can eat more of a moderate fat diet full of monounsaturated fats, like olive oils, nuts, seeds, things like that. We can cut down on added sugars and control the simple sugars in our diet. So it's not cutting carbs and eliminating carbs, but it's eliminating those added sugars. And we can also eat in our energy balance so that we're not overeating too much, causing additional weight gain. So if you can do all those 5 things, which you're probably thinking like, Mike, I mean, those are the 5 things you talk about doing anyway, right? Exactly. It's always great to find tips and strategies for your health where if you apply it, it works in 6 different areas, right? So if you can do those things that we just talked about to have more big LDL particles versus small, those are also going to help you in a variety of other areas. But when you look at your LDL number, you're not going to see big or small. You'd have to get another test that's going to get particle size, which you can totally do. And I'll link up, there's a good one. I'll link that up in the show notes as well. Let me make a note to do that for you. One of the examples that I think is worth sharing with LDL cholesterol particle size has to do with fish oil. So, and this is why it's important to understand your overall lipid profile sometimes, is that if you take fish oil or you supplement with omega-3 fatty acids, those long-chain omega-3s, which we generally refer to as fish oil, that actually can cause an increase in your LDL cholesterol. So then at the surface, you're like, well, that can't be good, right? But what actually happens is it changes the proportion of particles, of LDL particles in your body going more big and then less small. So we're converting small, dense LDL particles to larger, the balloon particles. And what that does is it actually will reflect a higher overall total LDL cholesterol number. So sometimes you can say, oh, this is why it's important to just know and understand what you're digging into, because sometimes you get 15 minutes with your doctor and you don't have the time to discuss all this. Like if you had a good 45 minutes, you could really get into all this with them, but you don't. So it's important, I think, to do research and understand what's going on yourself. Supplementing with fish oil can cause a rise in your LDL cholesterol because it creates more larger LDL particles, which is good. So it's like, yeah, your LDL cholesterol number went up maybe a little bit, but the quality of those particles is different. They've actually made the change to make them better. So next, let's talk about HDL cholesterol. HDL cholesterol is your good cholesterol. Fortunately, so there has been some research looking at particle size differences in HDL cholesterol, but we don't really need to get down into that. With HDL cholesterol, it's the opposite of LDL. So we want more. Women historically have higher levels of HDL cholesterol than men. So when you look at recommendations for HDL cholesterol, so women generally have higher HDL cholesterol than men. So when you look at HDL levels, recommendations for women are greater than 50 and recommendations for men are greater than 40. That's just because the baseline level of men are HDL cholesterol for men is going to be less. But really what we want to shoot for, if we can shoot for greater than 60, then we're doing really well. Now, good cholesterol is you call it your good cholesterol because you want more of it, but it actually, the way it works on something called reverse cholesterol transport. So it can actually help pull cholesterol out of your system. Whereas, as we were talking about with LDL cholesterol, that those small dense particles can get stuck in your blood vessels. So HDL cholesterol, we want more of it because it actually works sometimes in sort of a way opposite to how LDL cholesterol can function in our vasculature, right, in our blood vessels. HDL cholesterol, things that we can do to boost that: exercise, eat a moderate fat diet, right? So saturated fat, this is kind of like the thing about saturated fat that's nuanced, is saturated fat causes an increase in your LDL cholesterol, but it also causes an increase in your HDL cholesterol. So that's why you don't want to cut saturated fat out completely, but you also don't want to eat as much as possible because you're going to get increases in both the good and the bad. So you got to find that moderate level. And for most people, because it's just so easy to eat saturated fat, that we have to actively work to control it. Because if we didn't, then we just end up eating too much. But so exercise, moderate fat diet, we stop smoking. Smoking is going to decrease HDL cholesterol, so we stop smoking. One thing to remember is that if you're actively trying to lose weight, your HDL cholesterol can actually go down. So it generally will go down a little bit during weight loss, but then once you move into more of a weight maintenance phase and your weight stabilizes, it's going to increase back up again. So weight loss is going to cause this temporary decrease in your HDL cholesterol. And the other thing is alcohol. We talked about this in the last episode. Alcohol consumption increases HDL cholesterol. I'm not going to get into it a ton more because you can go listen to that whole show. But when we're thinking about these metrics for health, right, we want to dial in our LDL cholesterol. We also want to dial in our HDL cholesterol. And then the last piece of our lipid profile we're going to talk about is our triglycerides. Now, triglycerides are basically just fats. And so what this is doing is essentially measuring the fat in your bloodstream. But here's the thing that's a little tricky. In order to lower your triglycerides, sometimes referred to as your trigs, in order to lower your triglycerides, it actually has nothing to do really with the fat that you're eating in your diet. It has more to do with the sugar you're eating in your diet. So if you want to lower your triglycerides, you need to eat less sugar, specifically foods with added sugars. Yes, if you decide to go on a low carbohydrate diet and cut out carbohydrates almost exclusively, grains, starches, etc., that's gonna send your triglycerides, crashing really low. We want to get our triglycerides definitely below 150. The closer to 100, the better. And if you can cut out added sugars, and you're not eating a caloric excess, those two factors, which we were actually just talking about those with LDL cholesterol particle size. So if you do those two things, that's going to lower your triglycerides, and that's really important. I think triglycerides are one of those things that have been long tied to cardiovascular health, cardiovascular mortality, that we just don't talk enough about. I think probably because LDL cholesterol is just such a strong predictor, so everybody focuses all their effort there. But it's super easy to look at triglycerides. If you got your triglycerides are like 200, your triglycerides are like 250, and there's not specifically like a medical condition that's causing that, like that's an easy win for you. And so, new year, new metrics for health. I really encourage you to get a lipid panel done. Look at these things. Look at your LDL cholesterol. Look at your HDL cholesterol. Look at your triglycerides. Because you might be saying to yourself, I'm doing all the things I need to do to be healthy, but your blood is not reflecting that. And so what that means is you're probably not being as consistent as you think you are, or you're not applying these strategies as thoroughly as you need to. But triglycerides, if your triglycerides are over 150, that's an easy win for you this year. Really, so I encourage you to focus on that. One last word on triglycerides is that exercise, physical activity, also decreases triglyceride levels. So again, you can see we're circling around this same core amount of habits to improve lipid panels, to improve these markers of cardiovascular fitness. It's very, not to be reductionist, but we really want to focus on these core habits, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit when we're talking about being a performance optimizer. All right, last up was we're looking at kind of these metrics for cardiometabolic health, right, which are lipid panels and now also blood sugar markers. We want to talk about two markers for blood sugar to pay attention to. First one's fasting blood sugar. This one, super simple. We want to make sure we're always less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. This is going to be fasted. What's cool about fasting blood sugar is you can test this from your own home. You go to a CVS, Walgreens, Wegmans, pharmacy, wherever you are, and you can get a glucometer pretty cheap, right? You wake up first thing in the morning, prick your finger, and it'll tell you what your fasting blood sugar is. You definitely want to do this a couple times, couple days, to get an average of what it really looks like, because sometimes people's blood sugar can just be higher certain mornings depending on sleep, a variety of other factors. So get a couple data points, but it's really simple. I mean, if your fasting blood sugar is 110, right, and maybe you didn't know that, and part of it could be just because you're much more sedentary than you thought, right? That maybe you're getting in a little bit of exercise. We talked about this in the exercise episode, is that you're getting in workouts throughout the week, but you're so sedentary the rest of the time. And you feel like your diet's dialed in. You look at your fasting blood sugar and it's a little higher than you thought. That's a good way to see that your body's giving you feedback that you need to move a little more during the day, especially if your diet's already dialed in. So fasting blood sugar, less than 100, super important, because generally it's going to creep up as you get older, kind of like blood pressure, unless we're really, raging and working against it. So you got to stay on top of it. The next thing is hemoglobin A1C. So for the longest time, fasting blood sugar was kind of the standard measure, especially if someone was going to get diagnosed with pre-diabetes or diabetes. But as I was talking about, there can be some variability person to person, especially with morning fasting blood sugars, that doctors are relying on that less and less for diagnoses for these conditions and moving more to hemoglobin A1C. Now, hemoglobin A1C looks at glucose molecules stuck to your red blood cells. And why this is so good is because your red blood cells have a lifespan of about 3 months. And so what we've learned with hemoglobin A1C is that it's a nice long-term marker for blood sugar control, right? Because it's going to look at about a 3-month time period on average, the life of that red blood cell. With fasting blood sugar, for example, you're going to the doctor in 2 weeks, and so you're like, all right, I'm going to cut my carbs and cut my sugar, calories, all that stuff really low for the next 2 weeks. You can drop your blood sugar pretty quickly. So you show up at the doctor's, they do a fasting blood sugar, it looks good, and you've successfully fooled your primary care physician into thinking that you have good blood sugar, right? When you really just went on this 2-week blood sugar binge. You can't cheat the system with hemoglobin A1C like that. So that's why it's like a much better marker. And there's a variety of different thresholds for hemoglobin A1C. The one that we really need to hold ourselves to is we need to be less than 5.7. So a lot of those markers we've been talking about with cholesterol and then also with blood sugar are in the units, milligrams per deciliter. With hemoglobin A1C, it's actually a percentage. So 5.7%, we don't want to get any higher than that. Higher than 5.7% is considered prediabetes or diabetes, depending on how high you get. But so we can do much better, and we can stay below 5.7, ideally closer to 5, right? And that's really going to show that we're tightly controlling our blood sugar. And as we get older, that is going to be so important to our overall health. Not just our cardiovascular, our metabolic health, but Alzheimer's disease is considered by many people to be type 3 diabetes because of the impact of elevated and uncontrolled blood sugar on its progression. And so it really pairs into our cognitive health as well, which is just another way to show that all these systems are related, right? When we were talking about triglycerides, right, the fat in your bloodstream has to do with the amount of sugar that you're eating, right? And those added sugars that you're consuming and the total calories that you're consuming. But that also is going to reflect your blood sugar, which could have impacts down the road on your cognitive health. Like, we can't silo our health so much. We opened the show talking about how your VO2 max is going to be a huge predictor of your longevity, right? So we can't silo these different aspects. And that's why I think it's important, why I'm really encouraging you this year to take this, new year, new look at these health metrics to get, I'm going to say holistic, but I'm going to kind of cringe as I say it because I think like holistic health is just got such a bad rap. It's so cliche, but we're going to get this 360-degree look at our health. And it's not that hard. I mean, you can get most of it on your phone and one trip to the doctor to get some lab tests. So I think it's really important to invest in yourself early in this year. If you haven't had some of these metrics, because you go to the doctor, chances are maybe they'll say every 2 years we'll get your cholesterol checked or something. So, let's get a good baseline on where you are with a variety of these metrics, have the conversation with your doctor about it, and then you can really know, well, what's the plan to move forward? And as you can tell, as what we've talked about, the plan is basically a lot of the same stuff, right? And that's going to transition us to what I would call being a performance optimizer. So those are the targets. We talked about the target goals. Now I want to talk about these action goals and things that you want to do to be what I call a performance optimizer. A performance optimizer is someone that works to optimize their performance overall in life. This is someone who lives the strong, fit, and healthy life philosophy, which we talked about in another show, that if you're doing that you are a performance optimizer. Now, over the years, I've been so fortunate to work with a variety of people in their health from all different walks of life, whether these were, we traditionally call them like everyday people, which is kind of condescending, right? But just, everyday people like you and me. Also worked with people who are professional athletes, right? So they have this higher physical demand than most. And I've also worked with individuals who were executives of big companies, right? And so they have this higher demand, higher stress, just different stressors than others. And what I found across all these different kinds of people in all these different situations, that there are these core metrics that we're always going back to. And some people were really into I know we were talking about not doing reductionist, but what are the core things that I really need to focus on no matter what? We talked about this in the Strong, Fit, and Healthy Life with the different levels of exercise, this same idea. And so these 5 things, embody what I call being a performance optimizer. So it has to do with steps, sleep, meditation, nutrition, protein and vegetable meals, and then also workouts. That these are the 5 things that we want to look to optimize on a daily basis, but I'm also going to challenge you to hit certain metrics on an annual basis as well. So first, steps. We talked about a lot about this in the show 2 weeks ago with the Strong, Fit, and Healthy Life philosophy. Our target here is 10,000 steps. Yes, 7,000 steps. Is that going to benefit you? Totally. But it's kind of like the blurb I read you from the research paper, that the more you do, the better you're going to get with these results. And the difference between 7 and 10,000 steps gives you such an additional benefit on risk reduction of so many diseases. But here's the other piece that's important. It's also about stopping inactivity. And that if you're working to get 10,000 steps a day, that means you're going to have to just be more active. And if you're more active, that means there's less time when you're inactive. So when the steps area of being a performance optimizer, it is about boosting overall activity, but it's also about how do we break up and reduce prolonged periods of inactivity. That's really important. So our goal, 10,000 steps or 3,650,000 steps per year, right? That's our target. And the reason I've set these annual targets for being a performance optimizer is because doing it for 2 weeks, great. Doing it for a month, 6 weeks, awesome. Doing it every day for a year, that's really where you get the compounding effects. And that these compounding effects of consistently doing these behaviors is really where you reap the health benefits. And so everybody who's all anti-New Year's resolution, here's the solution. We're not talking about 4 weeks. We're not talking about 14 days, 28 days. We're talking about 365 days of commitment here. And if you do that, that's really where you're going to start making huge changes in your physiology that's going to allow you to perform at whatever you define performance as in your life. You're going to be able to perform at that new level. So next up, sleep. And I'll tell you, if we look at all the things that to be a performance optimizer, sleep for me personally is definitely going to be the toughest one, because your goal for sleep is about the 7 to 9 hours. And I fully appreciate everybody needs different levels of sleep. However, I cannot imagine anyone saying, oh, getting 7 hours of sleep was a bad decision for my health, right? Yes, you can get away with 5. You can probably get away with 6. But there's things that happen in our bodies and in our brains when we go through so many different sleep cycles every night that you just can't hijack. And so 7 to 9 hours of sleep is so important. Not only is it going to help you cognitively, but it helps you metabolically too. We spent the whole beginning of the show talking about how do we optimize, ourselves metabolically using a bunch of these different tests as the benchmarks to improve our health. I read a paper not too long ago that was called Sleep, the New Treatment for Obesity, because what we're really starting to understand in the research community is that insufficient sleep is a huge driver of metabolic disruption, but also from a behavior perspective. People who get, say, 4 hours of sleep versus 9 hours of sleep in clinical research studies, the 4 hours of sleep, people eat more food, right? People who get less sleep, who get insufficient amounts of sleep, consume significantly more sugar on a daily basis than individuals that get adequate amounts of sleep. Like, we're not even getting into the hormonal disruptions of not getting enough sleep. These are just like straight human behavior things. You just don't function as well if you don't get enough sleep. And I know you can sit and listen to this and you're thinking, but Dr. Mike, my life is different. It's so hard. Trust me, I understand. That's why I opened this up saying getting enough sleep is the hardest one for me on the quest to be this performance optimizer. It takes time. You're going to have to say no to things to get to bed earlier. So this is really something that I encourage you not to short circuit. Again, it's super simple to track. If you have an activity tracker, I don't care about the types of sleep, REM sleep, deep sleep. I'm not convinced that activity trackers really measure that in a meaningful way. But when you look at on a day-to-day, week, month, year basis, how much sleep are you getting on average? That's the number we want to optimize. And it's going to be somewhere between 7 and 9 hours for you to optimize for both mental, physical performance, but then also your overall health. The next one I want to talk about is meals. Now, one of the things hopefully you've noticed if you listen to or if you watch a variety of these episodes of the Dr. Mike Show is I like to talk about nutrition strategies that you can use, but I don't necessarily get into the details about this is exactly what you should do for your diet. Because candidly, and it's what I tell clients for as long as I can remember, I don't know exactly what's best for you, but we could figure it out, right? And so since you're listening to the show or you're watching the show, I don't know you specifically, so I can't figure it out for you. But I can give you those guide rails to work within with your nutrition to then optimize it based on your own needs and preferences, right? So that's what we're doing with being a performance optimizer. What are the things that are the most important when it comes to your nutrition? We talk about how can we reduce this down to this core principle. Core principle is going to be protein and vegetables at every meal, right? We got to have a piece of protein at every meal, anchor our plate with protein. It's something that we need to get on a timing basis throughout the day so we can't skip it. And that's so important for optimizing muscle recovery and muscle growth, which also supports those physical fitness goals that we were talking about before. So protein is a non-negotiable. And the other one is vegetables. We talk about vegetables all the time, especially when you combine it with protein, which is very satiating. Protein foods are very satiating themselves. And then you add vegetables, which have very low energy density, right? Not a lot of calories per bite. So you get to eat a lot of them. They have fiber. They contain vitamins and minerals. We just need to eat more of them, right? And if you look at recommendations for vegetables, they're literally laughable. 5 servings of vegetables per day. That's 1 cup. A serving is 1 cup of raw vegetables or half a cup of cooked vegetables. Like, we should be almost doubling this on a daily basis. So from a performance optimizer standpoint, what you want to do is you want 3 meals per day that have protein and vegetables at them, right? And you could do this. Why this works is if you're like, hey, I got to follow a ketogenic diet, that's great. You should still be having vegetables in a ketogenic diet. Maybe it's asparagus and mushrooms are the ones you're going to have, right? Versus butternut squash. So that's fine, but still ketogenic, you should be doing protein and vegetables. If you're eating a vegetarian diet, you still need to find protein. It's more difficult, yes, but you still need to have it, and then you still need to get your vegetables. If you're eating kind of this more moderate, carb-controlled, diet, that's probably the one where I track at the most, protein and vegetables are really going to be the foundation. So whatever your dietary plan is, and this is also the cool thing about being a performance optimizer is it fits in with whatever you want to do in your life, but we still have to hit these core principles. It's what I would always tell like clients who want to follow a vegetarian diet. Totally, you can follow a vegetarian diet. We can totally follow a vegan diet, but there are still core biochemical needs that your body has that we have to meet, even though you decided not to consume animal products or not to consume meats, right? And it's the same thing with being a performance optimizer. There are these core daily actions and actions that we need to accumulate on a yearly basis to perform at our best. How we go about doing those, I don't care as much. You can individualize it to your own life and what you want to do. But for the nutrition part of being a performance optimizer, it's 3 meals containing protein and vegetables every single day. Now that accumulates up to 1,000 protein and vegetable meals per year. This means you got to be about 92, 91% compliant if you think 3 meals a day every day for a year. So there's some wiggle room there, right? Because we need the wiggle room in life. And it's the same thing with, if you look at the sleep metrics, we're going to talk about meditation in a second. Same thing in there on those times. The annual goals have some wiggle room in them because I understand that you're going to live your life, but we still need to go after these metrics. So with nutrition, our goals, 3 protein and vegetable meals per day. Next up is meditation and mindfulness. Now, you might be thinking, how is this really getting into our core set of activity and nutrition? Because it's so important for our overall cognitive health, right? And if we're looking to perform and be at our best, how could we neglect our brains? And meditation, specifically like a mindfulness meditation, is like exercise for our brains. One of my favorite books, I've read it once each of the last 2 years, is called, I have it right here. It's called Altered Traits. Hold on. This is the book. Let me see if I can get it to focus next to my head there. So it comes into focus. Altered Traits. This book is amazing. And what this book is really going to show you, if you read it, it's a little on the sciencey side, but it's going to show you the power of accumulating time with meditation and those impacts on your brain. And so what it does for our overall cognitive health and sharpness, what it does for our focus and attention is unbelievable. But also what it does for our happiness, our ability to live life at a lower stress level, our ability to lower our blood pressure, right? Which is really important because your blood pressure is going to climb as you get older. It's exercise for the brain. Just like we say, we got to get in our workouts, we got to get in our steps. I think it's really important that we get in this meditation time. 20 minutes a day, which is significantly less. If you think about the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which was really what brought, I've talked about this in the past, on the Keep Going episode, which we can link up, that they were looking at mindfulness-based stress reduction, if you didn't watch that episode, was really what brought mindfulness meditation to a clinical setting in Western medicine. And they were an hour every day was that program. And so I'm not even saying let's do an hour. Let's just do 20 minutes. And there's a variety of kinds of meditation that are similar to mindfulness, transcendental meditation, mindfulness meditation, whatever this is. But what you need to focus on is spending that time focusing on your breathing, controlling your mind, slowing down your thought process, and creating distance between stimuluses, sounds, experiences, etc., and your brain. This book, Altered Traits, again, I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're on the fence of, is this really worth it? Is this not? But I've never come across someone who's been a high performer who didn't do things to take care of their cognitive health, who didn't do things to sharpen their minds, because so much of performance is mental. And this is really what we can do on a daily basis to make sure we're functioning at our utmost best. 20 minutes a day, and we accumulate that up to 7,000 minutes per year. So that's really that from our meditation and our how do we take care of our cognitive health, being a performance optimizer, 20 minutes a day, accumulating up to 7,000 minutes per year. And we think 7,000 minutes, that's a lot. This is a daily commitment. And we have one more thing. We're going to talk about workouts. But so far we've talked about steps, activity. We've talked about sleep. We've talked about food. We've talked about our cognitive health or meditation. Like, these are big things to perform at your best. It is a big undertaking. But at the same time, if you just say, I'm only focusing on these 5 things and I'm not going to make it more complicated than this, it is also extremely liberating to know that you're focusing on these core factors and you're not worried about, like, do I need dumbbells or kettlebells or a barbell or sandbag? Is this organic or frozen? Or, like, don't have to worry about any of those things. Let's just distill it down to these 5 key components. The last one are workouts. We want to hit 3 workouts a week. So if we do that, we want to accumulate that up on an annual basis to 150 workouts. Alan Cosgrove, has been a longtime colleague, and he always does this annual workout goal. And I think it's a great idea because it takes your mind out of the day-to-day, week-to-week. I haven't worked out in 4 or 5 days. What am I going to do? That minutia sometimes slows down our progress because we just say, give up, doesn't matter. But you can always work towards this bigger target. That's why I love the annual targets. And also the compounding effect of getting 150 workouts. And they can be workouts not saying anything about duration, anything about type. You do whatever you want. Just make sure you're getting it in. That accumulating 150 workouts in a year, for many of us, that's going to be a stretch, right? Some people maybe, hey, you run every day, you're like, no big deal. That's fine. But for you, maybe the meditation is going to be hard. Or like I said, for me, the sleep part's going to be the hardest. 3 workouts a week, accumulate 150 workouts a year. So if we can focus on these 5 aspects of our health and our life to become a performance optimizer, not just on a daily basis, but accumulate that up to an annual basis, like, you are going to not just feel amazing by the end of the year. You're going to feel amazing at the end of the month. But it is truly going to transform your physiology, like the inside of your body and how you function. So you're going to wake up feeling good and truly feel like you're performing at your best. So I hope that this has been really helpful for you to look at some of these markers, our blood metrics that are important that we need to look and we need to optimize, but then also these core 5 activities to become a performance optimizer. As you can tell, I've put a lot of thought into this idea of being a performance optimizer, really distilled down a lot of those experiences and things that I've observed over the years working with people to create this set of metrics. Now, talking about the year-long accumulation of metrics, right? The year-long accumulation of steps, meditation minutes, that can seem really daunting. So I also think it's important that we break things down into smaller chunks, right? Something called a sprint. And to do that, I said, okay, well, what does this look like for 6 weeks? And, sometimes people say, well, resolutions, they last 2 weeks, they last 28 days. Everybody's got a different opinion of how long it lasts. 6 weeks is long enough that you can go full on with your effort, right? But it's not too short that you don't feel like it's not too long that you're not going to feel like you haven't reached the end or the end is too far away. So 6 weeks is a really good sweet spot for a lot of goals. So I put together this month, a variety of resources that I call the Performance Optimizer Challenge. So you can take everything we just talked about. If you look at the show notes page of the chart with your daily metrics, your sprint or your 6-week metrics, and also the annual and everything we talked about in today's podcast, and you can just go at it and become a performance optimizer as long as you keep me posted on your progress, because I'd love to hear how it is. But if you want a little extra help, a little extra coaching, I put together a nutrition guide, I put together a prep guide, and also what I call the Vault, which is a variety of information, resources, whether it's workouts or it's videos that I've accumulated over the years that from other people that I find very valuable, apps that you can use, just a vault of resources that you can pick and choose from to support all these 5 areas of being a performance optimizer, plus some motivational text messages along the way. If you want that, you can join the Performance Optimizer Challenge. If you just go to substancenutrition.com, there'll be a link on the homepage about that. We're going to start this challenge as a group on January 2nd. So we'll link it up in the show notes, but you can also go to substancenutrition.com and see a link on the homepage to join and join this Performance Optimizer Challenge. Again, if you just want a little bit of that extra support and resources around. If not, totally fine. I've given you the keys to the kingdom in this podcast too, and you'll see it at microcell.com and also in the show notes. I hope this episode's been really helpful for you today. I think taking time every year to relook at what's our health look like, how can we do better, what are the things that are working, what are the things that are not, and we oftentimes don't look deep enough into some of this blood work where there are things that could be missing. And I think you have to be the number one advocate for your health. And so I'm not saying go make medical decisions on your own. I'm literally saying don't do that. But I'm saying take the things we've talked about, have a conversation with your doctor about these different metrics, find out what these different blood values are, and talk with them about how you can improve them. And we've talked about some lifestyle strategies for a lot of those very specifically. But if you can do that and really take charge of your health, this is going to be a really great year for you. So again, keep me posted on your progress. Go to substancenutrition.com if you want to join the Performance Optimizer Challenge, and I hope you have a great 2023.